That was a great reading. Let's clap for that reading if we could. That was really nice. I got so caught up, and I was waiting for the second act to come up, and then I realized I got to preach. The Seeking Sermon series is based on this Lenten study we are doing, produced by Sanctified Art, which is this really interesting group of poets and artists that put together this study book. And the study book this week highlights two stories. The one we just read about the Samaritan woman, and one we did not read. The story that we did not read is the Israelites traveling through the wilderness, and they reach this point that they're absolutely thirsty, and they need water, and they complain to Moses, and then Moses complains to God, and God comes out and says, take this staff, smack it on the rock, and it'll produce water for you so everybody will drink. The Israelites in the wilderness really are asking, will you give us a drink, God? Will you take care of us even now? The Samaritan woman is asked by Christ, will you give me a drink? Will you take care of me so I can take care of you? The stories invite us to think about our own lives. Where are we thirsty for God? When do we find ourselves asking, will God take care of us even now? And where is God asking us for a drink of water? All week long, as I've pondered these questions, I could not help but see the contrast between our lives and the biblical people of God. Water reveals so much about our relationships. In the United States, we take water for granted. How are we to relate to a story about people thirsting in the desert for water and not hearing it? It's just poor planning. Is there ever a time in your day when you're more than 10 steps away from a faucet of water? We do not work in the United States for water unless it's your profession. Immediate access to drinkable water is a basic assumption that we have about life. In our homes, we run it until it's warm enough to use or cool enough to drink. Sometimes we forget the water is running all together and just let it go. When we wash our hands, we let the water run as we scrub with soap, even though it's not necessary. Never thinking about how much water we're wasting as we're just scrubbing on our hands. And why should we? In our heads, water is a never-ending resource. To be honest, I never really thought about urban water scarcity. I thought it was impossible until Johannesburg, South Africa. In 2015, 2016, that major metropolis became aware they were running out of water. And still to this day, they have to put tight restrictions on it. What are you going to do with a city of 5.5 million people when they don't have water? According to United Nations, 26% of the world's population does not have access to potable water. That means 2 billion people cannot turn on a faucet and get water when they want to. And almost 4 billion people are stressed for water at least 1 month of the year. When I think of water, I mean really sit down and think about it. It reveals to me our relationship with humanity. Do we conserve it? Do we work for others to have it? Do we see it as a problem, our problem, or do we see it as their problem? Or is it only a problem when it impacts us? We live in a land of 10,000 lakes. Water flows freely and abundantly in Minnesota, but are we caring for it as we should? And in Minnesota, our problem is not getting to water and not finding water. Our problem is keeping it clean. In the 1940s, 3M dumped per and polyfluorinated substances into the landfills, thinking the ground would just take care of these chemicals. And today, those chemicals are called forever chemicals because they will not go away. Today in Cottage Grove and Hastings, they're spending billions of dollars trying to solve that problem and provide safe drinking water. And this is an issue that even faces us at our home in the Elkin household because we're on a well. And they come in and test my water every year to make sure that we are not getting contaminated. The first year was no problem. Second year was no problem. Third year problem. Well, it's still no problem, but we're going to put a carbonated filter in just in case. This summer across southern Minnesota, central Minnesota, small ponds and lakes will start to develop a green algae bloom. It'll be a green sludgy frosting on top of the water. And despite the fact that it's green, it is not from nature. The algae blooms are a direct result of chemicals. Chemicals spread over farm fields, lawn fertilizers, so we spread so we don't have dandelions. I've made it abundantly clear how I feel about dandelions. I'm pro-dandelion. It comes from the chemicals we spray in lawns to control mosquitoes. It comes from the road salt we spread over icy roads. Richard Connor, the editor-in-chief of the UN report that did a global study of water, revealed that globally, 80% of wastewater is released into the environment without any treatment, and in many developing countries is pretty much 99%. Water is a gift from God given to all creation. We take it for granted, we hoard it, we waste it and pollute it, and when there's a problem, all we do is point fingers. The answer is quite simple. It's just very simple. Adapt to live in harmony with creation. But that requires some level of sacrifice, some level of change within ourselves. As a person of faith, I see living in harmony with creation as a part of living in harmony with the Creator. Last week we read about the Pharisee named Nicodemus, who comes to Jesus after Jesus went into the temple. He turned over the tables in the temple, condemned the temple practices, and challenged all the Jewish leaders, especially the Pharisees. And the encounter in the temple and with Nicodemus sets the table, so to speak, for our story today. Today, we move from inside to out. There's no closed room, but we are outside in the middle of the day in the heat of the sun. And our character is not an insider, but an outsider. As I referenced in the video and the work of Caroline Lewis, Nicodemus, she says, is a Pharisee, an insider, a leader of the Jews. He is a man, he has a name, and he comes to Jesus by night. He is afraid that people will see him with Jesus. But still, something in Nicodemus' heart yearns for change, for new life. The Samaritan woman is a religious, political, and social outsider. She is a woman with no name, but she comes to Jesus at noon in full daylight. Nicodemus is a person who received clean water, but through a system of abuses of power and prestige and control have polluted the streams and the lakes. The Samaritan woman is desperate for clean water. She brings her containers to the well in the middle of the day when no one will see this 5-time divorced woman gathering at the well for water. Now, too often and incorrectly, we'll see the contrast between these two characters as revealing the new inside and outside construct of Jesus' kingdom. In this scenario, in the inside and outside being reversed, Jesus is angry with the insiders and loves the outsiders. People who support this position, and throughout history, a lot of theologians do, they'll view Nicodemus and the Samaritan woman this way. See, Jesus did not come for the important people of the world like Nicodemus. Jesus came for the no-names, the downtrodden, the outsiders. Now, I invite you to fight the urge to read it this way, because in full disclosure, as a pastor, I'm clearly an insider. The Pharisees eventually become rabbis. The rabbis eventually become pastors. I am an insider. Don't cast me to hell. But if you come to worship, if you serve in the church, if you're faithful in your relationship with God, whether it's online, in person, if you financially give to support a congregation, you are an insider too. Why do we go through all this thing, this whole relationship, if God is against us? If God doesn't like us or love us? As humans, we're just programmed to view life and humanity as either good or bad, inside or outside, as blessed or cursed. And we struggle so much to conceive that God could love both the inside and the outside. What compels me to make this statement is these stories. The Israelites in the wilderness were given water to drink as a sign of God's love and compassion, even when they complained. Nicodemus and the nameless woman are both given living water to drink. They are both afforded the possibility of being born again through the water and the Spirit. But naturally, for Nicodemus, this is going to be a challenge. He has to move beyond the construct that has formed him to see this living water and Spirit moving in his life. But the Samaritan woman, she is blessed. She is lifted up. Despite her having to come in the noon of the day, which is a time you want to be hidden, she is made prominent. We tell her story. She tells her story back to other people. She is proud. She's lifted up. It's natural for her to feel joy. This past week in the Lenten Bible study, I lifted up a point we often overlook when reading the Gospel of John. The entire purpose of the Gospel of John is summed up in one verse. And that one verse is in John chapter 20:31. These things are written so that you may believe in Jesus, that Jesus is the Christ and God's Son, and that in believing you will have life in his name. The nameless Samaritan woman believes in Jesus and discovers life. And Nicodemus will eventually discover life as well. We read these ancient stories to be told when we forget that this is still true. Those who believe in Jesus will find life in his name. Will you give me a drink? The question is really an invitation from God, an invitation presented to the Samaritan woman by Jesus, and essentially states, if you serve me, you will discover new and abundant life. We have Joel Brand here. Where are you, Joel? Right back there. Joel is here as the director of a local tree house that we work with in a relationship with him. Will you give us a drink to share? The people that we are serving through this community, because we gather here in this place, because we give our heart and our time and our money and our energy, we support a place like Tree House that is reaching out to the needs of this world. We're going to be talking about a March food drive this day. This March food drive is so people in St. Paul have access to food. And because we gather in this place, because we share of our resources, because we give to the world, they will have food. Later on this month, we'll have representatives from the Dakota Family Clinic, from Emma Norton, who will come here. And they will be talking to us. And as their words are spoken to us, they'll be saying to us, for the people they represent, will you give us a drink? What I propose to you is that question is turned back on us. When we respond to give people a drink, we give life to others, but it is in the giving of life that we actually receive life. We receive an abundant life. Jesus, just like Jesus with the Samaritan woman, he presents her a claim, I am the one who speaks with you, and then leaves it for her to respond. And so when we look at this lesson, when we look at this situation, it is just laid out for us to respond. Are we willing to care for our neighbors? Seeking not just to quench their thirst, but to find living waters that sustain us all. It is up to us how we answer that question. And when we answer that question to live for Jesus, we find life ourselves. Amen.